My life story as a youngster is no different than many other youngsters because I wasn't the only one, my family wasn't the only one suffering during the Depression years. I remember earlier on when I was 2 or 3 years old, I remember being awakened 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning several times by my mother, who would say, "We have to get dressed, get dressed in a hurry." I found out later on that was because we could beat the rent. My mother took great pains to make me look prosperous. And how she put a meal together 3 times a day was a miracle. Many times my lunch would be a ketchup sandwich between 2 pieces of sliced white bread. By the time I was 4 or 5, I realized that the next kid had a nicer sweater than I did, or a new pair of shoes, and I never had new shoes. I used to get hand-me-downs with holes in the soles. My mother would put cardboard in it to prevent it from seeping into my feet. I never felt that I was any different than any other kid. My father had been a successful band leader, sort of society bands, and when the Depression hit, no one was hiring any kind of bands. There were no weddings, bar mitzvahs, and celebrations. So my father was out of work. My father, unfortunately, never recovered from that. By the time I was 15, I was earning more money than my dad, which then I realized how terrible that was. How did my dad feel that his 15-year-old kid was bringing in more money than he was into the house? He virtually was penniless. He had no income. Eventually, he got a job as a cab driver, part-time cab driver, and by that time, I was in my teens, and I was well aware of the financial situation in our family. But my father would come home at 6 o'clock in the morning after driving all night, come into the room, and he would hang his trousers up on a nail and then go to sleep. My mother would wake me up shortly after to go to school, to get me ready to school, and we would together empty out my dad's pockets, which was full of change. My father would bring home tip money, pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters. That was generally the rule. One day, my father got a $50 tip, and later on he told me the man was drunk, so he gave him $50, thought it was $5. $50 bills, I'd never seen one. They were rare. And my father gave a fellow cab driver $25. He split it with him. And when he came home and told my mother was ready to kill him. How could you do that? And my father explained that this poor guy, he had 3 kids, he needed some money. And I can't tell you, some psychologist might explain to me that that's where I got the seed. My first job was in a bowling alley setting up pins. This was before the electronic pin setter. Then I was working for a jeweler, running pieces of jewelry and down to the jeweler's market every day. And then I got a job in a department store working, I was a stock boy in a Snellenberg's department store in Philadelphia. I couldn't wait to get out of high school. I was a top student from the year 1 to 11, and my 12th year, I just bided my time. I was a lame duck student. I just couldn't wait to get out because I wanted to get a job and make some money. I had no aspirations to go to college. I really never knew what I actually was going to do with my life until I was about 28 years old. My sole motive in life was to earn a living. I wanted to be able to help my family, and that was the motivation, to help my family, because my father never recovered from the Depression years. My mother, as a consequence, suffered from it. And I just knew that I was able to, and I should, and I was an obligation. I had no pressure from my parents, but I started to make some money, and that's what I did. So I applied for a job one morning to a local manufacturer of large-size women's sportswear. And when I walked in to apply for the job, there were about 50, 60 young men ahead of me waiting. And I almost walked out of the room. I figured, I haven't got a chance here. And this woman who was doing the interviews somehow caught my eye, or I caught her eye, and she said, "You wait here." And she, one by one, she got rid of the 50 or 60 guys, and she came over to me and said, asked my name, told her, she hired me. So as it turned out, that was my entree to the women's sportswear business. And about a year later, my boss gave me an opportunity to become a salesman. I was a terrible salesman, by the way. I hated it. I traveled on the road for 7 weeks, and I was a lonely young man, and I didn't like traveling, selling these clothes. But I stuck it out, and I brought back a few orders. But and that was the start of it. It wasn't until later on that I realized that I had developed an aptitude and an eye for women's clothes. Before that, I had spent 9 years with a company that was established called The Villager, and that's where I really learned the ropes. My dream was to one day own my own company. So in 1970, I started my own company in a label that I called Jones New York. And I eventually built it into a $4.5–5 billion company. Well, you stop and think about it. If I had gone to school for 4 years, I would never gotten the education at school, at college, than I got from actually being in the field, in the factories, and in the fitting rooms, and developing groups of clothes. I worked hard. I was determined to make a living. That was my drive, and my parents were still alive then, and I wanted to see them have a better life. They couldn't understand how I was making a living. They had a sense that I was doing well because I would give them money every week. And I learned later on, of course, that they didn't know how to handle money anyway. My mother, when she passed away, she had like $132 in a special saving account, and she left it to me. That's something, right? She thought of me. Hooray for Hollywood. Well, I was actually doing Hollywood while I was still in the garment business. My first 2 movies were back in 1983 and 84. And I had 2 big hits, and I got hooked. I'm a better editor of ladies' clothing than I am of scripts. It is indeed a challenge, as the apparel business was a challenge. But it's my golf game, and I enjoy doing it.
Your philanthropy is what makes cancer a curable disease. Sidney, please join us up here. Give us a remark.
The word philanthropy was just, if you asked me to define that, I wouldn't have known what the word meant during those early days. But I was never a dreamer. I dreamed of making a living, if you want to call that a dreamer. I was a doer. I had to make it up in the morning and make a living. I didn't really get wealthy until I was 60, 61. A lot of guys inherit their money, and other guys make it when they're 30s and 40s. I didn't make any money until I was 60. Then I learned if you make money, the more money you make, the more money you can give away. My first venture into giving was in 1996. I believe one of my first ventures was to establish a cancer center in Philadelphia, my hometown, and I gave them a gift to set up what is known as the Kimmel Cancer Center in Philadelphia. This was at Jefferson. And shortly after that, I was invited to become chairman of a drive of a march on Washington to get Congress to enhance the budget for cancer research. And I gave them a substantial gift. I think it was $3 million.
We are on the edge of so many breakthroughs, so close to finally finding the answers that have eluded the cancer research community for generations. But medical research takes more than dedicated researchers. It takes money.
And people used to ask me, oh, why cancer? My best man, Dick Gutierrez's daughter, eventually died at the age of 24, and that's what urged me to go into cancer research in a bigger way. Why Hopkins? Well, Hopkins has already been established as the #1 hospital in the country and #3 in cancer. I picked up the phone, and a week later, some Hopkins people came down to see me in New York, and I let them talk me into giving them a gift. I didn't need much convincing to say this is a place for me I can call it home. And even though it's not my Philadelphia home, it's a second home in a way. So that's why Hopkins. I was joining the big leagues, so to speak. You know, when you give money to an institution or a hospital like that, you can't lay out what you expect. You expect a cure, an overnight cure for cancer. You're never going to get it. Hopefully, one day it will become just another chronic disease, which can be controlled. 17 years ago, we established the thing that we call the Kimmel Scholars. I have a great group of great board members. I mean, this is the creme de la creme of cancer researchers. It wasn't my idea originally. I embraced it immediately, knowing that what I was doing was helping young postdocs.
Pleasure to meet you.
Oh, Andy, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Just getting out of school and didn't have enough money to set up their own lab. And yet these were the young people who were depending on to one day make cancer a chronic disease.
And what it does is all the information is here inside the nucleus, and it comes.
So each year we give 15 candidates $200,000, which represents to me a $3 million gift each year to the Kimmel Scholars. And that's what I do. I love doing it. Caroline will surely follow through with it.
The philanthropy is something that I've been watching Sidney implement over the last years, and it's taught me a great deal about giving and the responsibility that comes with wealth. I'm basically witnessing greatness, and I know that. Sometimes it brings me to tears, not because of the quantity, but because of the depth of his humanity. I feel the Kimmel Scholars is going to really be the big legacy, because so many people are going to benefit from the scholars and their level of knowledge and what they bring to the table. And I really feel that this is the future, and that's the future of this philanthropy.
One of my earliest Kimmel Scholars was a woman named Linda Lau, who's presently heading up the Brain Cancer Center at UCLA. 6 or 7 years later, after I gave her her gift, she saved a friend's life of mine. She performed a successful brain operation on a man who was going to die, and he's still alive today. So that's already worth all the money. You save a friend's life. No greater gift. And I'm grateful for been lucky enough, and that word is a very important part of my success, luck. Luck and hard work. Anybody tells you they weren't lucky, they're not being truthful. And I got lucky. When I first walked in and saw my name on that building, I thought about my dad. And that's what I thought about. He couldn't have ever imagined that he could see his son's name on a building of this importance. So I think about him in a way as a sad figure, but with a good heart, a twinkle in his eye, and a very generous person. He gave it his all. To this day, I feel that I was blessed with good parents. The fact that my father could give away half of $50 at a time when we were desperate to put food on the table, it indicated what kind of guy he was. And I guess that's where I got it. I don't know. I think all of us have certain responsibilities in life. Mine is to help others.